Welcome, Wargamers, to the astro matrices of the mortal realms as we explore the incredibly cool lore from the Seraphon battle tome simply called Portents of Blood, and so let's dive in by reading that. Troubled by the darkening fates, Slaan of many constellations hold a rare telepathic gathering. Their conclusion is to commence a new era of aggression. Amidst the gloomy Bane woods of Penultima, an alliance of 3 constellations, the Starborn and Coalesced, descend upon warring undead and demonic forces. As the Coalesced plow through the midst of the foe, drawing both deathless spirits and malicious demons to them, the hosts of the Starborn secure a series of mystic obelisks erected by tribes who received the gifts of the Slaan during the Age of Myth. By the time the spectral generals and demonic overlords realized the Seraphon's intent, it was too late. The star rituals of the Slaan and their priestly servants supercharged the obelisks with purifying lights of Azir, bolstered by the hoarded energies of the Astro Matrix. The web of celestial power that crosses the battlefield soon annihilates both enemy armies, dissipating them utterly. Across the realms, many such victories are won as the Seraphon strike back, more determined than ever to see the great plan brought to completion. I love to cover stories that just immediately create a sense of a narrative game, right? In this case, I'd say if you have a Seraphon player, anything that's death and chaos, you can turn this into a great little campaign, but we'll touch on that later. But this story tells us a few things about the Seraphon that I found particularly interesting. The Slaan rarely communicate with one another, like one of their psychic gatherings. And I guess I don't know why, I just assume they work together more because they're all working towards the same great plan. But if they don't communicate, I don't know how that all works, right? Like, are there instances where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing? Is that why the Seraphon plans, don't quite always pan out or something like that? I would love a deeper exploration of the great plan and how the individual Slaan fit into it. Because sadly, as someone who doesn't know a lot of the old world Lizardman lore, which we'll talk about here later, I look at this and I'm like, the great plan only seems to come up as a plot reason for why the Seraphon are always at the right place in the right time, but there has to be more to it because they have to know some aspect of it independently if they rarely communicate. Because in Broken Realms Be'lakor, Lord Croak did not know that his actions would be used to fuel greater destruction by Chaos armies. This is a big thing if you want to go watch my review of my coverage of Broken Realms Be'lakor. He basically lays out the blueprint for Be'lakor to enact wholesale slaughter upon the realms in an insane way, which just tells me that the Slaan are certainly not omnipotent. But how far can they see into the future, right? Like, how long in advance can they prepare things? Maybe the whole reason the great plan isn't working is because teamwork makes the dream work and all the Slaan are acting largely independently. Even though they're doing good independently, they can't cohesively bring the plan to fruition because they're not working together. And I think about that, I'm like, that makes sense, but then again, they don't have the same trappings of pride and arrogance that man does. So it's not like they're all competing to be like the best Slaan ever, you know what I mean? That's not like anyone's trying to greedily hoard their work and not let anybody else see it so that nobody steals their, their paper, basically. So I don't really quite know how to justify that one or kind of rectify it. It's a tough one, and then I'll ask this, if you were a Lizardman player back in Warhammer Fantasy Battles, I'll be honest, I have not read any of those battle tomes. I've been trying to pick up their army books whenever I see them like at used bookstores, and I never find the Lizardman one. So tell me in the comments, if you would, was the great plan more concrete back then? Like, because when I look at like wikis and stuff like that, people write things that were, maybe a Black Library author had subtly nudged it to seem like there was a big plan in play, and then, people who write the wikis will take that as fact. It's like, well, the writer kind of tongue-in-cheeked it a little bit, and then all of a sudden it's written as fact. So I didn't quite know. Were the Slaan more cohesive back then? Like, did they work together more? Because I love the idea of the realms being designed with this energy web throughout them, right? It's something we talked about with Broken Realms Be'lakor, like the realm gates. They're this intricate web of point A to point B to point C, that just spans all of reality, connecting it. It just seems like the Slaan don't have much of a single unified goal to be able to use this perfect design of either the realm gates or the astro matrix or all this kinds of stuff. As you would imagine from the phrase, great plan, right? Great plan to me is like, we got this. We're all on the same page. And it just doesn't quite seem that way. But yeah, I don't know. I want to know more. So if you are a diehard Lizardman player and now into Seraphon, let me know in the comments down below. But moving on from the Slaan's role specifically in this, the question I have is, where is the Bane Woods of Penultima? Well, I know it's in Shyish. Penultima is a small island/continent landmass there, and they do have a region called the Bane Lands with a big forest right next to it. There's not like the actual label of Bane Woods of Penultima, but I think that's a pretty fair deduction of where this thing is. And I'm not super interested necessarily in the geography or anything of the region per se, but it makes me wonder, like, what about these tribes in this random backwoods part of Shyish received the Seraphon gifts? Like, what stood out about them? And I point out that region because there must have been something special about those mortals. The Seraphon don't work with Stormcast Eternals, the goodiest of goody two-shoes who have the same power of Azir in them as the Starborn do. So if they barely stop to acknowledge Stormcast, who are these, like, primitive settlers in the Age of Myth that the Slann were like, hey buddy, looks like you got a cool thing going on here. Here, have some obelisks of untold geomantic power. Take a few. They're small, right? Like, what fire sale was this? And I ask that specifically to point back to my earlier question, right, where was there something about this tribe that the Slann wanted to gift them with these obelisks, or were they put there in the Age of Myth because the Slann could see that far ahead that this spot would be the center of a massive battle? You know what I mean? Like, did they know that this was going to happen millennia in the future? Did they give the gifts to the tribe? If so, what made the tribe special? Or the third option is, did the obelisks serve a completely different function and were just convenient and like the Slann like hacked quote unquote into them to fry all the enemies? No matter how you spin it, it's a very interesting thing, and honestly, I kind of like that about the Seraphon, where it's like, I don't know what to think about this, like, you know, in terms of what the motivation was and that kind of thing, but all the different possibilities I can come up with are very interesting, and I'd like to know more. And then, no matter which outcome, you know, you kind of land on, whichever answer you think makes the most sense, it always begs the question, are there other sites like this across the realms, built for a mysterious purpose that we simply don't know yet? Like, if it was a matter of the tribe being interesting, are there other human tribes throughout the Age of Myth that the Seraphon work with? If it's a matter of knowing what's going to come in a couple millennia, then all of a sudden it opens up like, okay, well, what else have you dotted around reality, knowing that something's going to be useful someday? And it makes me very curious because, you know, if the second one is true, how many of these places exist? People can sometimes sigh when there's a realm gate just about everywhere, you know, because plot reasons. But if the vast web of the realm gates was intended to be one layer of creation, and like the geomantic web was another, they could, in theory, be most places, and that would be cool as heck, because then you could just have Seraphon popping up all over the place for, you know, channeling their energy of the realms and their use of it to really be able to add into most story arcs conveniently, like rather than just shoehorning them into everything. If the whole of the realms is littered with these sites of geomantic power, then they have reasons to be everywhere, and I actually quite like that a bit. Now I'm going to have a larger discussion about why this story is so interesting, and we're going to do that right after a quick word from today's sponsor. Alright friends, game time. Can you tell me what all 4 of these things have in common? That's right, they are all traps, but not the kind of traps that you would likely find within your role-playing game dungeons. But if you would like to increase the danger level of your dungeons, castles, and ruins with an extra hint of spice, check out the Treacherous Traps supplement by Nord Games, a massive compendium that works for any role-playing game system and injects danger into any corridor or chest. Now, this is a massive resource for any aspiring DMs who want to be able to create compelling and interesting games, puzzles, and pitfalls for your players in a wide variety of settings. It's full of fun artwork and helpful tips, and they even have these cool little random card generator thing so you can generate a trap on the fly if you're not quite sure how you want to torture your friends and family that particular day. No judgment. So add some fun and excitement to your next campaign by setting some treacherous traps of your own through the link in the description down below. Now, back to the show. Okay friends, so here's the big question. Why is this so cool? Alright, so I have a question for you. Were these pylons placed centuries ago, knowing that they would be needed? Again, I'm recapping our thoughts here. Because I don't really know. All we know is that they were placed in the Age of Myth. They didn't seem to have a function until now, at least not that we were told, when two enemy armies fell right into the jaws of this power grid, as I'm calling it, and got fried as they realized the entire area was going to blow. On one hand, I love the idea of that level of foresight, but it seems a bit inconsistent with their willingness to act when major realm-shaking events happen. Like, if they have that level of foresight, where were they over the centuries that it took Nagash to build the Black Pyramid? That was a slow burn, so it raises a lot of questions for me. They had a lot of opportunity to go in and kind of squash that. On the other hand, we have no idea what other function these obelisks could have been made for, and I hesitate to wade too far into conjecture on that one, but I would love for some book or battle tome to really spell out the geomantic web or the astromatrix within the context of the realms to get a better sense of the detail of it. I think that might help me wrap my head around like locations of power like this, like what do they actually mean, what's their rarity, that kind of thing. But one of the things that stood out to me was this set of constellations. There's 3 of them. 2 were starborn, at least 1 was coalesced. We don't actually see a whole lot of stories of the Slann, of the different types of Seraphon working together. Like, what do the Slann and Seraphon think of each other when they're coalesced versus starborn? I can't think of many instances where they've like truly mingled in this way, and I have to imagine there exists some kind of uncanny valley relationship to one another. They look the same. Clearly, they can tell that the coalesced are in fact Seraphon, you know, assuming that you're one of the starborn, but they are meat and bone, right? Their perspective is somewhat limited by their mortal coil, if you will. Meanwhile, the starborn are literally made of star stuff, to quote Carl Sagan, able to become light and nothingness at a whim. And that's on a basic troop level, but even with the ranks of Slann, are the coalesced seen as lesser? Does being coalesced dampen their minds and their ability to project across the realms like the starborn do? I mean, it certainly hinders their ability to move their forces, to enact change, because now they have to walk everywhere, but does it affect their minds and therefore the Slann's relationship to one another? These are the things that I think about, at 2 o'clock in the morning. But in closing, I like this story because it gives you enough detail to create a little 3 to 4 game campaign, right? If you have one Seraphon player acting in each battle, they can switch off between Coalesced and Starborn, and you can have these battles play out where you have your main battle with the Coalesced who's trying to draw in, he's meant to lose, he's meant to draw in both the Death Army and the Demon Army. And then for your next games, you can play as the Starborn who are going to each of these obelisks and trying, their victory condition is doing something with the obelisk. And that way at the end, hey, did the Seraphon player or players successfully, start up all the obelisks? Yes, then all the armies there in the center got fried. I don't know, that's the kind of stuff I'm into. It would be a pretty short campaign, but I think it would be a lot of fun, especially if you have those players or those models just laying around. But friends, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Like I said, especially if you are an old world Lizardman player, tell me about the great plan. As much as you can or you want to, I would love it. I'll pin the best comment to the top here, who's the most helpful for me and for new folks. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Let me know in the comments down below, and I will catch you next time. Happy wargaming.